and whenever it starts, and it'll have been started. But yeah, this thing right here is kind of weird because like they're so white, which is like, okay, that's interesting, but also the nativity scene that you can't see right behind or like in front of me is they're also Caucasian, but then they're also in the desert, which is interesting. And
Yeah.
like uh but then also Christmas is like a Christian thing, but then also like it's weird that there are Christmas trees and desert in the same story. This is interesting, you know?
Yeah,
Like
true,
how
true.
is this anyway, this is kind of a non sequitur, but anyway, this is kind of the house that I'm staying in. They've got it's got like a religious vibe to it, and
Gotcha.
so it's kind of good because it gives you some food for thought. Like
Absolutely.
maybe if we were in a different country, the people's ethnicity would be different, or rather, maybe their anyway. This is just some thoughts that I've been thinking. How are you doing? How was your weekend?
I'm doing pretty good, man. The weekend was great. I actually got to work on some new music, so that was fun.
Some new music?
Yeah, yeah. Been working on this new, like mostly acoustic song, and then spent most of like Saturday and Sunday just recording it. Laying down the tracks, the guitars, some vocals, and stuff like that. That was fun.
So what's your process for when you're making a song? Are you more of like you start with the melody first and then you work on the lyrics, or you just kind of tinker until you get something that sounds good? Like what does that look like for you?
It varies tremendously. It sometimes it may start with like a melody. Like this song, I had something on the guitar that I kept like just, doodling around. It's like, oh, I like this. I really like this. And I kept playing it, and eventually, that part connected with another part. And then I started like putting down some thoughts for lyrics here and there. I just jot down, and eventually I'm like, okay, let me collect all those little nuggets and see if they go together somehow. And then from there, I record usually a version of the pieces of the music, just so I can keep listening to it and then see what kind of melody will start like surfacing, because melodies will just pop when I hear the music. And then when I pick up sometimes I don't have the lyrics, I'll just mumble the words, right? Just to find what kind of sound I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And then when I pick up some lyrics, I'm like, okay, let me see if I can, fit it here. And if not, what choice of words should I go with to make it fit? And sometimes it's like completely the opposite. I may start with like some lyrics, like, okay, those lyrics, they really make me feel this. Let me pick up the guitar and see what comes out when I'm feeling that way. And then, I'll build it that way. So can never tell.
That's actually really interesting. I think so. Would you say that your whole creative process can be kind of described like this? Because I was looking through some of your blog posts, and actually the format of them, each one varies quite a lot from the one that came before. And
Mhm.
there's also kind of this interesting, like specifically with you wrote one about how to find how to choose the next book or how to read. How do you choose the next book that you read? And
Mhm.
even the one about work-life balance, it's like the way that the blog posts are structured. It's like quick thought, and then the example, quick thought, example, and sometimes the example's a picture. Sometimes it's like some other outside, picture. And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of curious, is like, does the way that you make a song, is this totally different than the way that you write a blog post, or is it like you just sit down and like you said, you just kind of go with what's natural? Like, yeah, is there any similarities there?
So it used to be that when I started like giving public talks, for example, I would like sit down for hours to prepare for it. Or whenever like when I started writing articles, like technical articles, I would spend like 30, 40 hours to write like a 5-page article because I really had to like sit down and work on it. Over the years, I've learned to, like creativity, you cannot, like a friend of mine described that recently, you cannot schedule creativity. It's not going to be like, oh, from 8 to 10 I'm going to be creative. It doesn't work like that. So instead of like sitting down and saying, okay, this is the time I'm going to be creative, I'm going to be, the juices are going to be flowing, I'm going to be like, it's not going to work like that. So I've learned that whenever I am feeling creative, I'll try to capture that as best as I can. Sometimes I'm like being creative in the middle of like some programming work that's like, okay, now I don't have the time, but I'll at least like jot down the thoughts on the side, and then I can keep working. And then I just keep over time collecting those ideas, whether those are like technical thoughts, maybe those are thoughts for something that I want to like blog about and expand on it a little bit more, like on the life balance type of thing. Or maybe like sometimes some thoughts come up that's maybe something that's bugging me, right? Something that's making me feel emotional about something, or like some nagging thoughts. I'll just write those down and keep those to the side. Eventually, when I do have the time to sit down for whatever, like, okay, now I have 2 hours to spare. What do I want to work on? Oh, I feel like working on some music. Okay, let me go look at my backlog of lyrics ideas. Maybe I'm not creative, but at least I have the product of something when I was being creative, and I just need to assemble that. So it's the same thing like with the technical talk. As people come up to me to ask questions, for example, my coworkers, team members and all that, I'll write down what was the question, what was my answer, because that might be useful to somebody else. Over time, I can collect on those and see, okay, what is the overlap, the cluster of ideas? Is that a song? Is that a blog post? Is that a whole talk? I've created whole talks just out of that, collecting all of these, you know, conglomerate of thoughts and saying, oh, this is a talk.
So I want to kind of go back real quick. This idea of collecting ideas, this has been a huge theme in my life recently. It's actually quite a struggle with me trying to figure out specifically how to organize these thoughts in such a way where it's not too messy or too big. But we'll come back to that in a second.
Sure.
You said this thing about can't schedule creativity. Um, I mean, is that really true? Because there are some kind of fields of thought, or some people say, and I think I'm kind of more on this line where it's like, sometimes it's not about being creative. Like sometimes it's about just putting your fingers on a keyboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's even weird. Like when you're, or I used to like write blog posts, and it was extremely difficult. It seemed like there was a lot of friction in the front because there was a lot of these like ideas, like, oh, because I keep lists, like assiduously write down everything,
Right.
and so now I've basically just got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sticky notes and individual like lists with hundreds of items in them.
Right.
And it's like, so how do you kind of bring all these things together? And sometimes it's not about scheduling the creativity. Sometimes it's just about writing down that thing or kind of
Yes.
putting it together. Like, is this, could you kind of consider this scheduling your creativity, or
So here's what I've learned a few years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago now. I've read this outstanding book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And it's a great book because she specifically talks about, you know, being creative, or, how do you do it when you're not feeling it? And then she does talk about, like, one of her practices is the morning pages, like where every morning you write out like three, pages worth of whatever. You just put the pen to paper and you start writing. And usually, like, the first half of it, it's just like throw away. The second half, it tends to be good, right? Because once you get into that flow, like the first or second page is like, you're just writing about whatever is like here. Well, as you start going into it a little bit deeper, you start like really getting into it, right? So that I have been doing quite a bit, where I do have a morning practice of just journaling, and then I'll journal whatever comes to mind, really, right? And every week, every month, I go over my notes, and it's like, oh, these thoughts, yeah, I should be expanding more of those into those, maybe around like blog posts. Yeah, this should be a blog post. Or no, this is gonna be, oh man, this is make my juices flow. I need to pick up the guitar. I need to hit the drums really hard and just get that all out. Right? I don't know what's gonna come out of it, but yes. So in that aspect, you can schedule creativity, not necessarily that something great's gonna come out of it, but at least you're conditioning yourself to say, okay, during that time, this is what I'm gonna be doing. Whether it's gonna be good or bad, what's coming out, it doesn't matter. At least I'm doing. And then another practice that she has on the book, she calls the artist date, which is you set aside 2 hours a week, whatever day of the week, time of the day. Like for me, it's usually it used to be Friday. Now I'm changing that to Thursday. Like Thursday from say 7 to 9 in the evening. That's my artist date. So that's like for me to do anything I want. Maybe something I haven't done in a while. Maybe something I've been planning on doing. Like, oh, I've been planning on picking up the guitar to, just jam. Or I've been planning to read this comic book. Or I've been planning to go take a walk at the park without music or anything, just so I can listen to like the birds and people moving around, whatever that is. Because you do those things like getting out of your regular schedule and you just say, yeah, that's the 2 hours that I have for me to do whatever the heck I want to do. And that also pays some dividends because then the mind is like, oh, I'm free to do whatever right now. It gets things flowing.
That's interesting. Yeah, there seems to be like kind of a consensus between being kind of chill, being relaxed, not being so stressed, and kind of the you mentioned the creative juices flowing. Like there's a connection between kind of taking it easy and producing good work.
Yeah,
That seems to be. I'm reading a lot of Tim Ferriss these days, and a lot of See, he's just very good, and a lot of the people
yeah,
that he interviews and brings on,
yep,
there's a common theme with them is
yep,
you can't be like, don't be a broke artist, have a job and also be an artist, because the job keeps your finances in check. It keeps you afloat essentially, and then you're able
yeah,
to take it easy when you create your work. And this seems to be how other people are doing it very successfully. And
yeah.
here's yet another example,
Yeah,
of
it's funny
just
that yeah, you mentioned, sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned Tim Ferriss.
yeah.
Yeah, I've read the 4 Hour Workbook when it first came out, and then I've read like Tribe of Mentors,
Mhm.
Tools of Titans, all those things. I keep following his blog, listening to a lot of his podcasts. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. Actually, The Artist Way, that's where I first heard of that book. It was through one of his posts, maybe 6 years, 7 years ago, or something like that. And then it was like at my list of to read. And then I had like different people recommend that book over the years. Like, okay, once I got to like 5 or 6 different people recommending, yeah, I should read it.
Dude, that's so wild. That blog post really resonated with me. I mean, it was like, it was perfect. Not perfect. It was just, it's like perfect in the sense that it was exactly what I was thinking about, and then the resource came to me, and it just was so organic to kind of my current thoughts at the time. It was so perfectly timed, and I thought it was so interesting that the way that you decided to kind of choose these books, where it's kind of a weighted average between like, is it something that you're passionate about? There's a weight for that, but there's also a weight added to referrals, and there was also an even stronger weight added to consistent, excellent referrals.
Yeah,
And this is kind
that's
of interesting
exactly right.
because this is exactly the way that I kind of choose books. Like, let's say, so Tim Fair, or in, let's say in Tribe, one of his profiles, there's a book on there. And let's say they recommend Atomic Habits or something. And then my sister comes to me and she's like, oh my gosh, I just read this crazy book called Atomic Habits. For me, it's that second one. It's the first one from the credible resource, and then the second referral from a personal friend or family member that seals the deal. This is like, now it's a must read. I've got to read this book,
Yep.
because not
Yep.
only are other people like high performers talking about it, but also it's kind of it's getting into the everyday like, and I thought it was very cool. Um,
Excellent.
and yeah, the artist way, Julia Cameron.
Yeah.
I think that's where I also heard about that too. Is
Mhm.
from, probably not. I haven't been following Tim for that long. I think
Mhm.
maybe since the 4 Hour Work Week. I think I discovered it in maybe like 2016 or something.
Okay.
But that guy, he's just amazing. He
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, in kind of what I'd like to do is actually straight up copy that kind of idea. So
Mhm.
in Tribe of Mentors, he's got these questions that he asks people, and this is kind of the foundation of the book, or the answers to these questions. And so
Right.
this is one of the questions I prepared for you. So like, what are the 1 to 3 books that you've given most as a gift,
Right.
and why? Or if you haven't given any gifts, what are your favorite books?
All right. Oh man, I have a long list. So it always depends. But like some recently that comes to mind, Atomic Habits is one of them. Because I've read it. I used to read James Clear's blog post before it became a book. And I remember I was like taking notes of his blog posts and more importantly, actually applying it, right? It was not just the reading it, it was like, let me actually do this and see if it makes sense. And it was like making sense. It was yielding results. When the book came out, I'm like, okay, let me check it out. And it's like, yep, it's just a polished version from the content I've been reading this far. So I had been recommending it to people. And the interesting thing is just seeing the people who I recommended the book with coming back and saying, thank you so much, for recommending that book. I'm doing things here. I'm already feeling a lot better. So that's a big one. Another one that's I've read 2 years ago for the first time, and then I, read it. I've read it again just a few months ago. It's called Badass: Making Users Awesome. It's one might say, oh, is it a book about UX? Well, not necessarily, because it talks about human behavior. It talks about, why do people decide to like purchase this book or this service or that service? How do people learn, right? How do we learn? How do we get motivated into, taking it a next step, into the next step? In that book, there was something about books that was brilliant, where she talks about, when you go to an Amazon review to see the review of a product or a book or something, we are not really interested in, okay, what do the people talk about this book, for instance. It's more about how do they talk about how they feel from reading the book. So it's about the person's experience, not the product that you're consuming. That was a huge shift for me to really think through all that. Like, and then I draw a comparison because she says, you want your product, your service to be something that people will be talking about how it made them feel, not about your product. So it got me thinking about how I've, people say, oh, Claudio, you're always like so organized with your ideas, your creative process, and this and that, and that's pretty awesome. So as I start like describing things, eventually Evernote will come up, because Evernote is a tool that I've been using for note taking since 2008 or 2009, like consistently, right? So then people will start checking out Evernote, not because I started talking about the product, but because I've been talking about how I use it, how it makes my life easier, right? So that's a great book, and it's such a quick read. Those are two the main ones that come to mind. Oh, the other one, I'd say, yeah, this one I started rereading as soon as I finished it. It's called How to Live by Derek Sivers.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah, he's just like James Clear in my book, where they are so concise with their writing, like with very few words. Like you read a sentence and you have to sit back and think about it. It's like, oh, that hit me hard, right? And Derek Sivers has this capability. And on this book, How to Live, it's short and sweet.
Dude, there's almost like more power. Like, well, I mean, there's obviously the saying, like, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. And so it's actually, when you see kind of a short book, and you see it done so well, it's like that already it commands a lot of respect.
Yeah.
And also, there's a lot of power to be had in the short statement that kind of makes, like, it doesn't really give you the answer. It kind of helps you on your path. And when you figure out the answer for yourself, it's actually much stronger. Like, that realization will stick with you, because it's not just information or like intelligence. It's actually understanding, and kind of like it helps build wisdom. And so when
And
you
yeah.
you know
Hmm.
yeah. And
I totally agree. And what I've been noticing is that there's two kinds of book for me that they will serve me in different manners depending on where I am in my journey. So there are certain books that's like, yeah, the shorter, the sweeter, the better, depending on the topic. If it is a topic that I've already been doing a lot of research on, I've been actually applying those and I've gathered experience, then short and sweet. In other cases, it's like, no, I'm pretty new at this. I need as much information as I can get. So in that at that point, I need like the dense book that, the authors will go like so many different ways, like repeating the same thing over with different words, with different approaches, because it's like, yeah, I'm so new at this that I need all kind of perspectives you can give so that I can relate to it somehow. So I've been noticing that.
Well, it's like it's the certain mediums are conducive to learning certain things, right? So like there are certain things that you shouldn't go to maybe like a podcast or a blog post for because maybe you are very new to the subject, or maybe you just maybe the thing being discussed is such a deep level. Like for example, cryptocurrency. Like you couldn't just go to like one blog post and learn about cryptocurrency and then understand kind of the implications of it or how it actually might be similar or different than current like regular currency. Like one of those, like that kind of topic might be better in a book, because the thing about a book, like to me, and I heard this recently, I didn't this isn't original, I forget where this comes from, but like what is a book? A book is just a collection of ideas that are tied by a similar theme that takes a long time to go through, you know. And whether that is a few hours or whether that's a whole month, like for some of these, sometimes it takes that extremely long time to actually sit in kind of this new topic or this theme and see these ideas come from different perspectives, to develop kind of an understanding of what's the author's even talking about, or what kind of the nuances of what they say. Because if you just kind of brush past, yeah, sure, you might get the information, but you won't understand how that fits into the overall context of kind of, I mean, I guess going back to this crypto thing, like how it kind of interacts with like society, or maybe like laws, or from the user's perspective, is it making any of this better? Um,
Right.
and so, uh, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Um, so you mentioned this, so kind of moving back to this collection of ideas, because you've mentioned it twice now, and I'm very interested because this is, it's something that I haven't figured out yet. So you've got
Mhm.
all of these notes, all of these things. You said you use Evernote, and I'm
Mhm.
guessing you just come back to Evernote every single day or week, or you have some routine maybe. Could you touch on like that kind of that routine of how you keep your, like, it's important to be organized in your real space, right? Because other
Mhm.
people can see it, and it's very real. But also, it's important to be organized in your digital spaces. And so, would
Yeah.
you kind of touch on that?
Absolutely. One might say that I'm even more organized in my digital space than on my physical space. I think it's easier.
Yeah.
But something I got from David Allen's Get Things Done, right? The whole idea of like getting stuff out of your mind into some sort of like, archives and, actionable things. That's something that I started learning back in 2004 or 5, if I remember correctly. And I had used several tools for it. At first, I started with like using Microsoft Outlook to organize those things, to get like the projects out, the tasks, the calendar, all that kind of stuff. Eventually, I tried like OneNote, I tried Lotus Organizer back in the day, Schedule Plus, and eventually I landed on Evernote because it works across all of the devices that I have. Because I have a PC, I have a Mac, I have an iPhone, I have an iPad. So I needed something where I could access my note anywhere, period, right? Um, so part of my process is collecting all of these things and I send it into Evernote, right? So, and this is one of the reasons why I like the tool, because if there's something on the whiteboard, right? I was just in a meeting, it's like, okay, those are some pretty good ideas. Let me snap a photo and then send it into Evernote. I run into something, there's a page on the desk that's like, oh, here there are some ideas. I highlighted some stuff. Let me snap a photo of it, send it into Evernote. So it's like, it's very easy for me to collect things and drop it into a single spot. And then, as with every system, it will only work well if you keep maintaining it. So, as part of my process, I'll do like daily review of my notes, weekly reviews, monthly reviews, quarterly reviews. yearly reviews. Now, do I review all of my notes? No, it's very focused. Like the daily review will be the things that happened today, the things that should have, that haven't, that may roll into tomorrow, right? And if the things that's like I had on my calendar today, I have to do this. At the end of the day, well, I didn't do it. Why didn't I do it? Right? It makes me reflect on it and say, well, it's because I showed up for that meeting, or somebody else showed up late, or maybe I was underprepared for that meeting, so it didn't really work the way I wanted. Okay, how can I course correct and do it better next time? Should I reschedule a meeting? Whatever the case might be. So I have this daily, reflections, if you will. Weekly, same thing. What happened this week? What's going to happen next week? Not that I can predict the future, but I can look at my calendar and say, well, I have the following uh, meetings on my calendar. What do I need to do to prepare for that? Can I just show up, or am I going to need to spend like 2 hours to really show up, prepared for that meeting? What kind of research do I have to make? Do I have some spot in my calendar to account for that time that I need to research and do, note taking and things like that? And then every month, I do review the full structure of where I'm storing things, right? Am I storing it in the proper notebooks within the tool? Am I applying the proper tags? And this is extremely important because, like, say you're just starting to learn about something, right? So you're starting to build your vocabulary around that topic. So you're going to start tagging those notes with those words. As time goes by, as you gather more experience, you're adding more resolution, higher resolution to those thoughts. So that's why it's important for me to go back and say, okay, what are the tags that I currently have? How are they organized? What are the notes that are going there? Oh, I created this tag here that only has one note. Let me go check. Oh, it's because since I created that note, other things happen, and now I don't think of that note by that tag. I actually think of it by thinking something else, right? So the way you recall information changes over time. So I make sure to review my system to make sure that it resembles how I currently am, not how I was, 3 years ago when I first created the notes. So this, ongoing review is a key part of my system.
And it seems like quite a complex system, right? So basically, you have an infinite stream of thoughts kind of come in one direction, and then there's essentially like a buffer, or there's like a staging area where all of these thoughts go to the staging area, and that's where they're. So when they get there, they're saved. They're kept onto forever. So the staging area is almost by design very unorganized. It's just kind of an aggregate of every idea you've had, and then there's this process of kind of going through tagging and categorizing and sorting these different things, sorting them specifically to be searched through later. And
Mhm.
whether that's through your daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly,
Mhm.
however you're going to be doing it, they're sorted in different ways.
Yes.
And so this is quite a complex system. And so you've been doing it for many years, I'm guessing.
Yes.
It couldn't have started like this, right?
No.
Like any complex system that works well, it came from a simpler system. And so what happened? How did you get to such a place? Like, where did this all come from?
So as I said, I first started looking into this back in 2004. I read this book, Get Your Life Back, Getting Organized with uh, Microsoft Outlook or something like that. It was essentially teaching David Allen's Get Things Done using Outlook as the tool to organize things. That's how I got started, right? Uh, and then since then, it just kept changing, right? I've been adjusting because that's, again, I keep doing that. Like at least every year, I take a look at my process, my system, my tools, and I evaluate, do they still serve me? Or am I just going by the motions? Oh, I've just been doing this for 10 years. That's why I do it. It's like, no, no, no. Keep reviewing it. Does it still make sense? Right? I don't want to go through like, rituals that make no sense, to enable me into things. So over the years, I've just been picking up different things. When I hear of maybe somebody has a different system of organizing their thoughts, I'll give it a go. well, let me try it out. Let's see if it works. So it's been mostly me like learning from different people, different systems, different tools, and incorporating it to the way I work. Trying it, see where it fails, see where I need to adjust it. Like recently, what I'm going through is the following. As I said, I've been using Evernote for 14 years now. And as you said, yes, so part of getting things done, the way David Allen had is you should have one inbox, right? So instead of having a million inbox, you should have one, right? You drop things into your inbox and make part of your process organizing that so that you can clear out that inbox. Some things are going to go into an archive. Some things are going to go onto the calendar. Some things you're going to get done immediately and move on to the next thing. So that's part of what I do. Everything goes into that inbox. At the end of the day, I take a quick, swipe through it and say, okay, this goes into with the following tags into this folder or that folder. Sometimes it's like, okay, this thing I created here, I don't need to pay attention to it, but I have to pay attention to it this week or this month. And then I have different filters where I can see that, okay, what's up this month? What's up this week? And I have quick access to these notes that I've created, right? So then it keeps getting reorganized as I go through it. Something that's I've been experimenting with recently, maybe the last month or two, is the following. People refer to these tools like Evernote, OneNote, any kind of digital tool as their second brain, right? Or their digital brain. So here's an idea that I've been toying with. Much like our first brain, we have conscious and subconscious, right? As things are happening, everything is getting pushed into our subconscious, right? Somehow it's there. It's in the mind. We don't process it until we pull it to the conscious front and say, okay, now I'm actively working on those ideas. It's right here at the forefront. So I started thinking, okay, I will see Evernote as my subconscious digital mind, where it's very easy for me to push stuff into it. And it's a little bit messy until I come around, I bring it to the forefront, organize it, push it back. So when I'm consciously working on something like, okay, I have all this research or of this, you know, separate thoughts that I've been, filing. Now I need to bring them all onto the table so that I can not just organize, but I want to do something with them, right? I want to turn them into my own things. Because sometimes, well, I collected a quote from James Clear that's like, oh, that's great. Okay, what are my words? Why does it appeal to me? What are the connections in my mind? Well, it reminds me of that person, of that place, of that project, of that past experience. So make those connections. That's the most important thing. Once you've made those connections, then now it became knowledge, not just information that's out there. It became knowledge that you can leverage. So I started experimenting with another tool called Obsidian that a lot of people are talking about these days. And to quickly go, why am I trying it? I like the way it links in and out of notes. So it's very easy to say, okay, go from this thought to that thought to that thought, and this thought here is related to back to all these other things. And it plots this chart where you can see the clusters of information. Oh, here are my thoughts about trust. Here are my thoughts about behavior. Here are my thoughts about life balancing.
Dude, this is I forget who there's some guy, he invented the internet back in like the 70s, or
Uh-huh.
specifically he invented the idea of the hyperlink, and it was like everything in the web was going to be hyperlinked, and he called it
Right.
like the hyperlink verse or something. I forget what he called it. This
Uh-huh.
seems to be very much along that line. I
Right.
was reading recently a book by Kevin Kelly called The Inevitable, which is
Okay.
just it's wild. It kind of gives it like describes the last 30 years through 12 like gerunds, so like present participle verbs or whatever. So like um I've got my list somewhere, and the list is really important because he gives kind of the next 12 verbs. So then the
Mhm.
12 verbs in the future are going to be becoming. So nothing is ever in a fixed state. Everything is always being iterated on. Everything's
Mhm.
always in a state of becoming a final product. Cognifying, everything will be cognified. We had manual pumps to pump water. Then we had electric pumps, which kind of the last 30 years was this whole like electrify everything. And then like the next 30 years is going to be like, now we're going to cognify the pump. Then he's got a bunch more: screening, accessing, sharing. But the two that I think are pretty special are sharing and like filtering, and kind of like interacting. But here, this obsidian stuff you're talking about, it really, like, of all of the data in the world, of all of the, you've got many backlogs, you've got your music backlog, your there could be weekend plans backlog, there's your book backlog, there's all these things. So you've got all this information, and sometimes what's important is not like having it all. Sometimes what's important is filtering. Show me just the small little subset of information that I want to use right now. And this seems kind of very
That's
useful
exactly
to
right.
scratch that itch.
Yep, that's exactly right.
I've been using a tool called iThoughts X, and it's more of like a mind map situation, and it really helps specifically if you're the type of person to kind of throw spaghetti at a problem until you kind of figure out what is valuable and what is not. iThoughts really helps me overcome any sort of blocks. I mean, it's like there's something about using like a very high quality tool where the tool itself almost disappears and it doesn't ever get in your way. There's no gumption traps, and it just lets you produce. And I think this kind of ties into what you were talking about earlier with your the emotional response. Like, what is the tool? It's like the tool or the book gives you an emotional response. It's not quite so much what the tool does. It's almost like what it doesn't stop you from doing, or the way it makes you feel when you use it.
Yeah, it's the way it makes you feel and the way other people will perceive you, right? So like folks who interact with me, on a consistent basis, they're like, "Oh man, again, you're so organized. You're awesome because of this, that, or the other." And it's like, yeah, man, it's just part of a system, And part of the system, I have this tool, I have this other tool, and they're replaceable, right? Which is the polar opposite of like, with my background as a software developer. Oftentimes, as developers, we just pick a tool and we fall in love with it, and we forget why we are using that tool to begin with, right? And now instead of saying, oh, we are here to build software to solve somebody's problem. Oh no, I'm building software because I want to write code in this tool here. Then we miss the point completely.
Dude, and it's so frustrating, or it can be. It is for me, where it's like there's a story where husband goes to the store, he buys half a chicken. He comes home and his wife's like, "We're having Thanksgiving dinner. Why did you buy half of a chicken?" And he's like, "Oh, well, we only cook half the chicken anyway, right?" And she's like, "Dude, what do you mean we only cook half a chicken?" And he's like, "No, we always only cook half a chicken, yada yada." And she's like, "Oh, well, that's because mom always did it like that." And he's like, "Well, why did you do it like that?" Like, "I don't know." So they call up mom. They're like, "Mom, what's up with this half chicken thing?" And she's like, "Honestly, I don't know. Mom always did it like that." Until they call up grandma. And then they call up great grandma. And eventually they figure out that great grandma lived during the Great Depression when they didn't have big ovens, and ovens were about the size of your arm, and so they only had room to cook half a chicken. And so now it's like this tradition of or it's like this decision that was made years ago, maybe, that was made for legitimate good reasons, has now kind of precipitated onto us today, where we could use, to extend the metaphor, we could use some framework over here or some database, just because that's kind of what great grandma used. But does it really solve the current problems? Like, does it really fit in with the context? And this is like not definition. This is the difference between information, being intelligent, and having wisdom. Is Terry Crews, the guy in the Old Spice body wash commercials, he says that following just intelligence is like following a GPS exactly. Like, and if the GPS says, "Oh, take a left off the jetty," then you're gonna be swimming. Like, wisdom looks at the GPS and says, "You know what? No, let's just go around," right? Like, and so the context is like 100% critical.
Sure.
This is interesting. So you mentioned kind of these yearly reviews. I have this idea that I think would be so cool, and I've kind of been doing it with the involvement stuff, or not involvement, the improving you. And instead of
Mhm.
doing improving use where they're fixed in time, where we just show up and learn maybe a specific skill, more of like it would be a whole new thing called like maybe Project Orca. And it's just totally centered around these ideas of the pod, right? And so we have the trust pod. The reason that the trust pod is a little bit different is because building trust and kind of it's a continual thing, and it's important to keep track of it over time, right? It's more of like a muscle than a specific like milestone that you hit. And so there's other ones that I've been kind of working on, like sales pod. All of
Mhm.
improvers are, the core of what we do is sales, but there's no sales pod. Okay,
Right.
there's an opportunity for change here.
Uh-huh.
And another thing that I was thinking of is kind of this yearly review pod, or what you're talking about. Like some of the reason, or one of the reasons I read books is not to learn the book, it's to actually hang out with the author, because
Mhm.
just by, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. This is a saying. Okay,
Mhm.
well, show me the books you read, show me the authors that you're reading, and I'll show
Yeah.
you your future. Right. So I can't prove this, but I think that there is something to say about just kind of hanging out with people who maybe you'd like to be, or who have skills you'd like to develop.
Mhm.
Maybe they have
Yes.
ways of thinking about things that are very valuable. Have you
Uh-huh.
ever considered doing something like this, like um, leading kind of one of these yearly review pods, or something like that, where you kind of everybody, we just get together and we kind of look over, oh hey, here's the um, this is what happened last year, these are my notes, uh, calendar. Like, have you ever thought about doing something like this? Because it's actually quite challenging
Yeah.
starting out. Or maybe a better question, maybe a different one, is where would you start, right? Like, so you could take
So
those.
yeah, so maybe starting like I'll think of my own like individual process, and then we could think, okay, how would a group setting, work out? So the like annual reviews is something I got from James Clear also like 7 years ago or so. If you look up on my blog, there's like an annual reviews or yearly reviews. Don't remember how I'm naming it, but that's precisely like, okay, January 1st, I'll look back and say, what are the main accomplishments last year, right? What were the things that I told myself I was gonna do and I didn't? Why? And then, okay, this is what happened, the highlights and all. And then at the bottom, what am I working towards? So new year starting, what's my general plan for this year? Where do I think I'm gonna be going? And then, so every quarter, I take a look at that and say, okay, this is what I told, because I put it as a blog post. It's out in the wild, right? So there are times when people will ask me, oh yeah, you said on that blog post you were going to be working on that. How's that coming along? So I need to have an answer, right? So I do that as part of my quarterly process, to have a look at it and say, okay, am I going on track? If I decided to go, maybe it's like, I started working on that. I actually didn't really like what I found. So I've documented my findings and I changed, to do something else, which is totally fine, right? So I do that. As part of that, I look through my notes. I look through the books that I've read, because I keep a log of all the books and my notes for that book. And then aside from that post, I always have a like the top books that I've read the previous year, because it I take the time to reflect upon the book and reflect upon my notes on the book, to see how have my notes evolved since I wrote those down. Because hopefully, if those notes were important to me, I'm hoping that I have put them into action, and maybe I've learned something from it. So it's a chance for me to further refine the experience that I got from the book. Same thing with quotes. Like for years, I've been like collecting quotes. Like whenever I run into a quote that makes me think about it, I'll keep it in my quotes log. So I'll look back and say, okay, what were the quotes that I've logged last year? And which are the ones that I think people should read this, or it's making me think more about it. And this is how I'm currently thinking of those quotes. Or maybe this is how they relate. Sometimes it's like, well, this quote came from some philosopher 2000 years ago, and this other one I got from James Clear 3 years ago, and this other one from Tim Ferriss 6 years ago. It's like, you start drawing those connections. And that to me is very valuable. So that's how I've been doing every year for the last 7 or 8 years. In a group setting, I guess we could expand that and have that as a conversation. If everybody does something like that, we get together in a room and say, let's talk about those things.
Okay. So this is fascinating because the only way that you're able to get this far on this journey is just from I don't know, just utter consistency, or like what kind of routine? What do your routines look like? And specifically, I'm wondering if you've overcome the challenge where maybe some days you wake up, you miss your alarm, or you're a little bit tired, or you got to work tonight, so you can't give maybe your full evening routine, but you can
Mhm.
give kind of a partial routine. Do you kind of have different routines for yourself where it's like, so if I've got a lot of time in the morning, then I'm going to do the large meditation, the large morning pages, the large journaling, you know. And then are there certain times where you do like the small version where, okay, today I don't have
Yep.
time to morning page, but definitely going to meditate? Or so what does this look like for you? Kind of how do you, is there like a dynamic adjustment each day where it's like, oh, today I'm going to, you know, do a little bit less of this to make room for this kind of, the metaphor might be using dials to kind of
Hmm.
dial up over here, and you can dial
Yep.
down over here to kind of afford that. What does
Yep.
this look like for you? Or maybe it doesn't. You're just so consistent, you know?
No, to be consistent at whatever, you have to do it consistently, right? Otherwise, if you're not doing, if you're just, flying by the edge of the seat or whatever, that's not going to work. So yes, I'm big into having rituals like that. So for me, every morning I have to meditate. Period. If I don't do anything else, meditation it is. Now, I've alternated between like meditating 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, right, over time. Um, like I spent a whole year doing exactly 20 minutes every morning, right? Because I use the Headspace, the app,
Yep.
and they have like guided meditations and programs and things. And I did their like 365 program, and I set like 20 minutes. I don't care where I am. Like if I'm traveling, if I'm someplace where it's not comfortable to sit, I don't care. I'll still do whatever I have with whatever I can with whatever I have. Now, there are times uh, where it's like, oh, yep, I woke up late, or there was something that came up, urgent in the morning. I cannot do my 20 minutes meditation. I'll do one. Like, unless the building is on fire, I should be able to do one, period. Right. And learning to do that, that was a thing, right? Because if you set yourself for, oh, yeah, I'm going to do 15 minutes every day. And then there's one day you can't do it. There's another day you can't do it. You're going to just give up, like I've done in the past. Then what I've learned is, dude, if you can do 1 minute, great. If you can't, like that's something I got from Headspace as well. If you say you don't have 5 minutes to meditate, you should take 10, right? Because if you live a life where you cannot stop for 1 minute to just sit and be, just stop. You're doing life all wrong, right? So I've learned to think about that. And sometimes, as crazy as it might seem, I may not have like that 1 minute. Like maybe in the chaos of a moment, maybe I don't have a full minute. I'll just let that one breath that I have out mindfully. Right? It's like whatever's happening, I don't have much time. Let me just have this one go out. Okay, now I go. Because when I do that, I'm back in the present. Right? I have that awareness, like everything is going crazy, but let's go. Right? So I do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I do that. I do, and then reading. So I do at least 30 minutes of reading every morning. Again, sometimes I may need to adjust for something that came up. I'm gonna have to only do 5 or 15, whatever the case might be. But I'll make a point to myself, even if I have to read one page, it will be one page,
Is this
right?
like a nonfiction book? Is this fantasy? Is this something to kind of get your gears turning? Is this before your morning journaling? Kind of what does that look like?
So the sequence is usually I will do some stretch, like yoga type of stretch for my back that's always messy in the morning. I'll do my meditation. I'll do some journaling. So I'll put down like what comes to mind right now in the morning. And meditation will unveil what's up here. If it's something work related, personal related, whatever it is, it will pop. So after meditation, I'll just journal. Whatever is right here, right now, I'll just write about that, right? Takes like 15, 20. Sometimes I get really into it. Then if I don't have a time constraint, I'll keep writing. And then after that, I will do reading, right? And things that will probably like stretch the mind, I do that in the morning. That's a very specific decision that I have. Not read things that are going to engage my mind before going to bed. That's terrible, because then I'm not allowing myself to sleep. It's like I read the thing and I get all excited about it. It's like now I cannot
Learn how to
sleep.
change the world, right? At 9:30, yeah.
Exactly. So those
Okay.
I read in the morning, and then before going to bed, I may read like an autobiography or something that's a little tamer on the mind. But I still do that right in the evening, and then usually that's how the morning goes, and then I just gear up for work. I'll take a look at my day schedule to see, okay, what are the meetings, for example? Am I going to have interactions with other people? If so, is there anything I can do to make sure that interaction goes well, right? Because sometimes it's like, oh, I remember with that person, yeah, last time we had some, disagreements over this, and I don't know how I came through with that. So let me more let me be more deliberate about it. Right. So just look ahead, and as long as you're not reacting, right? To things. You're being proactive about your schedule. So there are no surprises, right? I know what meetings I'm supposed to be in. Nobody ever pulls me into meetings during the day because it's like the people who I interact with for work, at the client and all. I tell them, look, I work on a schedule. If you really need me desperately within the day, you know, let me know. Okay, I'm here for you. But if you can afford, can we just schedule a meeting for tomorrow, maybe? Right? That way I don't have to react, because that's the thing. If you just pull me into a meeting right now, I'm going to be reacting. Whatever opinion you ask me is going to be what immediately comes to mind, which may not be the best way to do it, right? If I can prepare for it, if I know that meetings come up, I'm going to do my research. I'm going to recollect, okay, what is my current belief on that thing? Do I need to update that belief? Even more so if I'm going to be asked my opinion, right? I need to make sure that, okay, this is my opinion as of today, not the one that I've been carrying for 10 years and never stopped to think, do I still believe that? You know?
Right, because you can't be cooking the same half chicken. There could be other pieces of information that now
Yeah.
they're coming to light, and it's like, oh my gosh, actually, the original reason why we did this is actually not even valid anymore. So now I need to kind of re-update. It's interesting that you phrased it as re-update your beliefs, which
Yeah.
probably not a lot of people do that. Like they see or maybe some people see the belief or their beliefs as kind of fixed, but it's actually very fluid and very changeable. So
Yeah.
real quick before we move on, this types of meditation, dude. Okay, the other day I was meditating and using Headspace. Headspace is fire. It's the best app I found, and also the first one that I used. So I haven't
Okay.
used the other ones, so take that with a grain of salt.
Uh-huh.
But I was meditating, and it's so weird because meditating is like reading a book, where it's like there are certain things that you don't understand until you've done it like 100 times, and then it's like, whoa, that's crazy. And the other day, I think what they're trying to have, I haven't read about this, but I think what they're trying to have us figure out is that there's like a difference between you and you, or like you're not just your behaviors, but you're also your thoughts. There's like two different things there. And so with Headspace, commonly the routine is you kind of take your breaths, and then you kind of close your eye, or like as you kind of take your rest, you close your eyes, and then you have this world around you, and then it kind of comes in a little bit more to your body and like the weight of your body and how that feels, and then it comes a little bit more into like your breath, and then you're focusing just completely internally. And what I found was so fascinating was that on the way out, I realized that like my breath is not like, it was interesting. It was kind of like a Gödel Escher Bach kind of thought, where it's like am I am I like my breathing system, or am I the air? Like, what is important about this process? Is it the air that comes in and out, or is it um the esophagus and the, I don't know what, lungs? How, I honestly have no idea how breathing works. Um, but so, like, what is important of this? Is it the breathing system, or is it the air? And it felt, I felt disconnected from my breathing for the first time in my whole life. And then
Uh-huh.
and then now I'm like coming back. It's like, oh, and then I realized that that itself is a thought that I need to come back from. And it was just so exciting. I almost couldn't contain myself. Like, it almost broke, or it did break my focus. But that's part of
Right.
meditating. And it
Yeah.
was just so cool to think about, like, man, like, your breathing system is literally just an empty air sac kind of within, or from within me. And it was just like filling up and closing. And then that day when I was journaling, I was like, man, I am so grateful for, like, my esophagus, for, like, tunneling this air into this thing that I know nothing about, but somehow it works. And
Right.
it was just, it was badass. I was like blown away. I was like, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah,
um
I love
kind
it.
of, kind of expanding on that, I think Headspace only does one type of meditation, which I don't know what it is, but TF always talks about transcendental meditation, and a lot of the people talk about that. Like, have you experienced these different types?
I
um
have not tried Transcendental yet. There's an old friend of mine who took the course recently after doing mindful meditation, which is what we get in Headspace, right? And he said he did the Transcendental one, and it's like life-changing type of thing. He said, absolutely do it, even if you've been doing mindfulness or other forms. It's good to learn the different types. Again, perspective, right? Different perspective, different tools in your tool belt whenever you're feeling stressed or what have you. So I haven't tried that yet. I've been doing mostly mindfulness. The thing about the breathing is just, it's not about the breathing itself. It's the focal point, right? It's to focus on one thing and one thing only. And usually breathing is the easiest thing for us to like focus on, right? Because normally we are not focusing. So because our mind is in la la land. When you start paying attention to your breathing, you're here, right? So that's why, as far as I understand, we go with the breathing. But there are other techniques like the scanning, right? You do like, oh,
mhm.
there's a brim of light or whatever that you see, going up and down. You're not focused on the breathing. You're focused on this imaginary thing right in front of you, whatever the case might be. The thing about, like you mentioned on the thoughts. Here's another thing is like that some people say, we're not our thoughts. The fact that we have certain thoughts, like maybe we have like a really crazy, stupid, weird thought, it does not mean that you are that person just because you have that thought. And that's something that comes from through meditation, where now you're starting to be more aware of the kind of thoughts that we have, right? It's not good or bad. It's just, dude, they've been there. Maybe you haven't been aware of it. Now, through meditation, you are aware of those thoughts. And then the thing about mindful meditation or any kind of meditation is, are you going to engage with that thought? It's okay for the thought to be there, right? The thing is, are you going to engage with that? Are you going to be chasing after that thought? That's what's bad. And something that I really love, that's a visual concept through Headspace, where maybe you're like on the street, right in the middle of the street, and the cars are coming by, and you keep like chasing after every car that's coming at you, right? You're gonna get tired real quick. If you just step aside, stand on the sidewalk, you can still see the cars going by, very calming. Same thing with the thoughts, right? The cars being the thoughts, are you going to be right there in the middle chasing after them? Like, oh, that thought, bad thought, bad thought, bad thought. Or you just, step aside and like, yep, I see there's that thought there. There's another one here. Yep, good. I'll just be. That realization for me was key.
It's such an interesting metaphor. Like, instead of, it's like you can choose to not get hit by traffic. Like,
Yeah,
you're walking one way and you can watch it's actually kind of a wild idea, because in a way you can wait for the thoughts to kind of slow down, and then you can keep on with your path, not being hit by these things. I guess the extended metaphor being, you don't have to accept the meetings that are coming at you constantly. You can kind of take a step back and kind of see, evaluate, and then you can keep moving on. And correct me if I'm wrong, but a big theme of your life seems to be living very deliberately, like not kind of going by accident or just kind of willy nilly. It's being very deliberate with I don't know what your planning process looks like, and we don't necessarily have to get into that. And we've kind of got into this kind of retrospective, this looking back, and then taking what has happened and kind of either kind of doing a little remix of it or kind of iterating on it again, and then taking that today, and then actually not just making a plan, but actually putting it into practice and going forward like that. It seems very cool.
So yeah, like on being deliberate, I can touch on that real quick. There was a time in my life, a period of my life, where I was going on autopilot. I was not happy with the life that I was living, and I would get to places without even remembering how I got to places, because you're just like, yeah, you wake up, or you get off bed the last moment possible because you cannot hit the snooze button anymore because you have to, head to work, and then you go, but you're still a little bit like, groggy, and it's like, oh, I've made it to work, but man, I don't even remember going through that business intersection or whatever. And then the days go by, and then what caught me years ago was that if you ask me, hey, Claudio, what happened in your life, like within these years, I would look at you with a blank stare and say, I do not know. Man, that realization hit me so hard because I saw myself like working like crazy, doing a lot of stuff, being overactive, but just going by the motions, going on autopilot. And then I look back and it's like I have no idea what actually happened, important things that happened in my life during those years. That was my wake up call. From there on, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be more deliberate. I'm going to understand my values. I'm going to understand, what do I want to achieve in life. I want to make sure that I track important things, uh, you know, um, developing the gratitude type of practice, every morning, write down what are you grateful for. It may be a little thing, but then 3 years later, like right now, oftentimes I do that when I'm feeling a little bit like, nah, not feeling on a good day today. I'll go back to my gratitude journal, like, and then eventually I forget that I was not feeling well, right? Because I'm going through and I'm relieving like great like opportunities or great things that happen, great interactions. Sometimes like the name of a person will come up and say, this person, did this really nice thing to me 3 years ago. I'll pick up the phone and either like text that person, or depending on the time of the day, I'll call. Hey, what's up? Yeah, I just thought of you. Remember that? And then conversation ensues. And then I don't remember that I was feeling a little bit down 30 minutes prior. And so these little things, call it mind tricks or whatever, it's been working, man.
Jedi mind tricks. I love it. Uh, yeah, man. So, is it worth it? It's actually rather expensive. So, from my experience, this tracking and being very deliberate, it's extremely expensive, right? And not specifically in terms of a financial expense, in terms of an effort and a time expense. From that perspective, has it all been worth it? Or maybe a different question might be, what has been the best investment that you've made in your life thus far? It doesn't have to be money; it could be time, energy, focus, any of these things.
Oh, totally worth it. If anything, I wish I would have started earlier doing a lot of these things. So like best investments for me have been really cranking my reading habits. I've always been like a good reader. Like I used to read a lot, as a pre-teenager and then into my teenage years. I've always read quite a bit, but over the last like 3 years or so, I've made a point to myself that's like at least 30 minutes a day. Some days I do an hour. Sometimes on a weekend, I will sit and read for 2 or 3 hours. That's been paying off
Is this
huge dividends.
this is reading in a book? Is this like screening on a Kindle, or is this maybe screening on Audible? How's this?
All of the above.
Okay. Right
So
on.
for me, it depends. I do need to like highlight passages on books, and I do need to like write on the book, which I didn't used to do that up until like say 3 or 4 years ago. Books had to be like immaculate, and then I thought, why? They are mine. I'm not going to be selling them. I'm going to do whatever I want with them. So I started really like putting it down, highlighting, putting sticky notes on it, writing on them. If I need more space for more thoughts, I'm going to, pick up my writing device here. I'm going to write a bunch of notes about it. If I'm, and that could be on a paperback or it could be on Kindle. I consume all of them, all of the formats. I do consume audiobooks, but depending on the kind of audiobook, I'll have to put it down because I'm going to need to listen to it again, taking notes. Because if I'm driving and then this audiobook has like these great things that are making my mind really go, it's like, no, I need to be sitting to be able to write. I want to write those thoughts out. So yeah, I do all of that. And so reading, meditation, which I first started as a kid. I decided to just, shut the windows, sit down and go, mm, I don't know where I got that at the time. I just remember maybe I was 8 or 9 when I did that. And then many years later, maybe 10 years ago or so, I started actually doing it as a daily practice. Again, started as a 10-minute thing, dropped to 5, went a couple of days, maybe weeks without doing it, came back to it, and then broke down again, came back again. And it wasn't until maybe the last, yeah, I have like a 2 or 3 blog posts where I talk about that journey, where at some point I was like using Headspace and looking at the gamification side of it. Like, oh, I got a badge for meditating 10 days, 3 months. And then I remember like some days where it's like, oh no, oh, the day is gonna like reset. I'm gonna start the meditation app even though I'm not meditating. Like, dude, what are you doing? Just to get a badge? That makes no sense, man. And I documented that in blog
Well,
posts, right? Because it's
yeah.
it's a learning experience. Like, why are you doing this? Are you doing it for the badges, Claudio? Really? Like, no, I'm doing it for the practice. So I started focusing more on the what is the practice? Because oftentimes you're going to sit there, you're going to meditate, and you're going to say, oh, it's not doing me anything. I'm having all these thoughts. Like I heard the thing, the guy calling me back, and I was completely in la la land. Okay, try it again tomorrow. Try it again tomorrow. What I've noticed is that that time span between my mind going into la la land and me realizing that and bringing it back, it has been shortening, right? Where it used to be like I start a meditation, off my mind goes, and then 10 minutes later, oh, now, come back to your breathing. It's like, already? Nowadays, it's like, oh, wait, come back. Uh, just being more aware like that.
Yeah,
And
it's just tough.
uh-huh.
Like, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I guess the last and final like big investment, journaling. Just write down, slow down your thought. Oh, but I have it all up here. Oh yeah, then it's racing, right? Usually the person like myself back in the day who used to say, oh, it's all up here. I'm having racing thoughts. I'm having a hard time concentrating. I'm having a hard time falling asleep because it's all up here. As soon as you start writing it down, you're gonna have to slow down and not typing because like I'm a really quick typist, so I can type really quick. It's not that. I suck at handwriting because I have to do it very slowly. That's when you slow down your thoughts and then you can see what you're thinking right in front of you. That is a huge investment, right? Oh, is it expensive? Yeah, it takes time, but it's a huge investment.
That's interesting. This writing by hand. In I think it's like nursing school or a lot of medical schools, they actually you're not allowed, or at least when one of my sister's like best friends when she was in nursing school, she would always complain that they were not allowed to hand or to type notes because they found that like there was just a huge relationship between handwriting notes and actually like getting a good grade or like committing things to memory and all these
Yeah.
types of things. So there's some sort of connection between maybe slowing down and developing understanding and
Yeah.
maybe patience or in the handwriting.
There is more to it, and I'll tell you. Many years ago, way over 20 years ago, I got a little bit into speed reading through a friend of mine who was taking some like very expensive classes. So he gave me a few pointers, and one of them that I'm never going to forget is singing a song as you are reading, right? Think of whatever song you know the lyrics by heart, have it play, start singing, put whatever text in front of you, and read it. And you'll be surprised. One would say, wow, I cannot do that. Yeah, we can. Because
With
the
lyrics or
brain,
no lyrics?
with lyrics, I'm telling you, you're going
Really?
to be singing, whatever the song is, you're going to be singing, and then put some text in front of you and read it. When you are done, shut everything down, and then like write down, what do you remember from the text? You will remember a whole lot, because the brain, we don't have to like sub vocalize, we don't have to like read to ourselves, sing with our voices in our mind. As soon as we see it, the brain has already processed. So that to me was like, oh, and then I started making the connection, because like when I was practicing this, I could, for instance, have some sort of text on the side. I would be typing whatever I was seeing on the text while singing some other lyrics. And I was typing what I was seeing, but I was not necessarily processing everything. I'm seeing the words, I'm recognizing them, I'm typing them, but I'm not really thinking about them. Right. So that's again
Wait. What?
yeah,
This is wild. Wait, so
it
you're
is.
saying that you can multitask? Because, and this might be a little controversial, many women say that, oh no, they swear by it. In fact, I can multitask. My roommate, uh, my stepmom, many people. I remember I was at a Christmas dinner this year, and this was one of the topics around the table was, is it possible to multitask? And for years or my whole life, I was like, no, it's not possible. You can only do one thing at a time. But here, you're essentially saying that there's two different things at work. The song might actually be put into the you are not your thoughts kind of side of the brain, where the song goes over there and maybe quiets those thoughts so that your focused part, your deliberate part of your brain can focus on what you're reading and kind of comprehend that. And so maybe like listening to the music, maybe it can actually quiet down the distractions in a way.
So yeah, I wouldn't push it as far as to say multitasking, because I also don't believe that we can multitask, right? There is a very short span of what you can do multitasking, right? So what I'm describing with, I'm singing some song like mindlessly, it's like effortlessly, I can sing a song along a song that I've been listening my whole life. It's just part of me. I can do that while I'm seeing words materialize, right? And my brain can see that. That's why when we are driving and we're singing, in the car, when we see our exit, we don't have to see exit 135 or Houston. We don't have to say it. We see it, even though we are singing at the top of our lungs. We see it. It's just how it is. The whole multitasking, when we try it, yeah, we are doing multiple things at the same time, but it's like it's split attention, right? You give a little bit of attention to this, a little bit of attention to this, a little bit. And I know, like from playing guitar and singing. Oh, so you're playing guitar and you're singing. That's multitasking a little bit, because we do have to say, okay, when I'm in that G chord, that's where the chorus starts. When I'm switching over to this other chord, I should be saying this other part of the lyrics, right? So it's all stitched together. It's not that we are playing and singing as two separate things. We're splitting attention between the two. Does that make sense?
A little bit. What I'm confused about is, for example, piano, right? I think it's exactly the same thing that you're talking about, just manifesting with the other hand, essentially. But you play the left hand notes and then you play the right hand notes, and then your eyes are actually looking at two different bars where the instructions are coming from, and
Mm-hmm.
almost like language or the thing, you're like the compiler or whatever, and this is like the code, and then so what
Uh-huh.
comes out is like a working piece of software. Just kind of a weird metaphor.
Uh-huh.
But what you're saying is that there's not, you're actually doing one thing, and actually working both arms completely independently is actually the same thing. Like you're actually just
Oh, it's
doing one
one
thing.
thing. Yeah, you are doing one thing. You're playing the piano. To do that one thing, you have to use your left hand, your right hand, and your eyes, right, to see the notes that you're playing. Think of a drummer then. Is a drummer doing four things, like four tasks? No, a drummer is playing a song that within this bar is going to hit the kick drum, maybe open the hi-hats, maybe hit the snare here and a crash there, all happening kind of like at the same time, right? At least, I
So
mean,
then,
yeah,
so what is the difference? What is the difference? Because some maybe some kid who doesn't know, they'll see some crazy musical situation and they'll say, "Oh, the band is playing," right? So it's like a one that there's one action taking place. From the uneducated on the situation, it just looks like one thing's happening. But to maybe somebody who has done it for 20 years and they have all this experience, they see the drummer and they know not only like the song that's playing, but they know how the drummer is kind of keeping everything on the tempo. And so the drummer not only is thinking about playing his song or his notes, but also kind of keeping everybody together. And then the guitarist is not only singing or playing guitar, but also singing. And so, like, where is the division between the perception of just one thing happening versus the actual reality of one man is playing a bunch? Because playing the drums is multiple things, is it not? Or is it just one thing? Where do we make that distinction, right? Like, because like it just seems very similar to being at work and let's say watching a YouTube video and programming at the same time, right? So if that was part of your job, you know, somebody who doesn't understand might look at you and say, "Oh, he's working, right? I'm doing one thing." But in reality, obviously I'm not because oh, is it maybe that your mental focus is separated? And that's
yeah,
what
yeah,
wow.
because
So then
uh
yeah.
no, I was gonna say, think about it. Like, if I'm like maybe I just got a new CD. Yeah, I'm old fashioned. I like the physical CDs, right? Uh,
Okay.
right, and I'm listening to it and I'm excited about that. It's like I'm listening to the song and I'm listening to all the layers because, being a musician, I just don't listen to music, as a listener. I also listen to, like, from the musicianship's perspective, and from like writing lyrics myself, I tend to also pay attention to the lyrics. So at that point, if I put on that CD and I try to work at the same time, am I really working and listening to the CD? Am I doing the two activities? But yeah, they're happening at the same time, but it's like, well, no, I'm focusing on the work. Oh, I just heard a little bit of chorus here that's interesting. And then I'm back to work. The music continues playing. I'm, yeah, it's there, but am I really listening to it? Not until I say, okay, work, wait. Oh, that, and then back. So as far as I understand it, it's this split. We cannot do the two things 100% of the time. It's
Not yet
that's
at
what's
least.
not gonna happen. Yeah, that
Because the reason I think that the word yet is critical here is because you can't start out by playing like when you learn a piano song, you learn or come the way that I was learning is I wasn't taking a class, so I don't know how structured the teaching can get, but when I was kind of learning, I would do one hand first and I would play the one hand and then I'd come back and I'd play the other hand. And so in that sense, playing with two hands is multitasking because I can only focus on one hand at a time. And then as I built up this experience where, oh, the hands play together, now it's like the two tasks actually become one. And so do you think that there's kind of this sort of digestion period where multiple things become one? And so over time we're able to, where we couldn't multitask before, now we still technically can't because the task hasn't been split up. Now it's just been unified. So we can't ever multitask, but the things that we can focus on maybe expand in complexity.
I think what we're getting to is because it's very taxing on the mind when we're multitasking, that's why like, yeah, like playing a guitar and singing is kind of multitasking, because those are two distinct things that we are doing at the same time, except that we are really stitching those two things together, right? You pay attention to this thing, more to like the playing than to the singing, and then vice versa, and eventually you just go with it, right? Like driving a car with a stick shift. On the beginning, you're just thinking clutch, where first gear, where second gear. Eventually, you put all of those together into the act of driving a car. You don't think I'm shifting gears, I'm accelerating, I'm braking. Like, no, you're driving.
Okay, so this is very interesting. I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Sure.
Let me put on Do Not Disturb real quick. So here we go. So essentially, and are you able to see this thing here?
It's coming
This
up. There we go.
this diagram. Okay, so this is very interesting because this is essentially what I think is happening is that so over on the right side, this is the brain before we learn to overly complicate something or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
when we first start to learn a skill, let's say we're learning guitar, right? So there's the singing and there's the strumming of the songs. So the reason that we can't do those maybe in the beginning is that whenever this certain neural pathway fires, for example, singing the song, it's not connected. It's not very strong. So whenever the thought in the metaphor comes up into the brain and then starts hitting brain cells, it kind of gets lost in a way. And so then as we practice, as we strengthen that skill, more neurons, more myelin come and surrounds those brain cells. So there's less kind of entropy there. And so the thought tends to stick to one certain area. And maybe this is how we get better at something. And so here over on the left side, we have maybe singing and, well, I mean, next time what I can do better is draw my own diagram so that as we talk about it, I can kind of build on it.
Sure.
But let's see, maybe the top row of those nodes over on the left side, maybe here, this is
Mm-hmm.
singing, but then this is playing the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not until we start to practice those things together that it becomes more efficient from a brain thinking point of view to do them. This is kind of the idea of stitching things together, right? Or like driving a manual car. Like driving a manual vehicle is extremely difficult in the beginning because you can't think about putting your blinker on or you can't think about shifting gears because you're so worried about the blinker and that right-hand mirror, right? And so it's almost like you are multitasking by driving a standard transmission vehicle. But then as you kind of develop these skills, it actually just transitions into driving. You're not thinking about shifting gears or putting in the clutch or, downshifting to go up a hill. It's just part of,
Yeah.
it's just drive. And it's something that's also interesting is it's even weird to say this out loud. It's so common, this idea of learning a skill, that it's like kind of a little bit interesting to talk about it. But to me, it is multitasking, I think. And it's just like the way that it's multitasking until your brain gets so good at the context switch that they're actually in the same area. It's like your brain almost remaps something from long-term storage to memory, to RAM. And
Yes.
so,
Well,
yeah,
the
what do you,
thought that comes to mind with like context switch. So as long as it's within the same context, is it multitasking? Or maybe those smaller tasks, if they all are grouped together within the same context, like we're playing the same song, right? That's one
true.
context, right? It's like, think about it like when we are driving, why do people say don't, drive and text at the same time? Because that would be multitasking, and those are two different contexts. Talking is one thing, driving is another thing. You put the two together, you can split your attention because you're going to have to do a little bit of attention on the driving, a little bit of attention on the texting, but you cannot really do both, not safely, because those are different contexts.
Wow, this is like riveting stuff. So then maybe moving forward, something actionable that we can do is we can design kind of our maybe our desk or these types of maybe that's why you should have an organized desk because you want everything to be in the same context, right? As soon as you have a desk where uh, so this piece of paper over here that says open house, right? So this would be the definition of a multitask or like a distractible thing because it's out of context of work. Whereas your calendar and maybe your notes and your pens over here, whatever, this is not distracting because it's in the context of what you're doing.
Yeah.
This is very interesting. Is this
Yeah, yeah.
a breakthrough for you also, or this is just
It's
I
good
already knew
stuff. I've
this?
been no, I've been thinking through these things. It's the same thing with like you get from like Atomic Habits, like having your specific environments for the different things that you do. Like so when I'm home, I have my reading chair, right? I have where I meditate, I have where I make music. They are not all together, right? Because if you bring all of those contexts together, then the mind is like busy. That's why like having a TV set in your bedroom, not a good idea, right? Because the context of a bedroom is to sleep, right? Not to be also watching TV. Otherwise, the brain is like, oh, the TV is right there. Can I do that? Can I do that? Can I do that? Well, separate those contexts. That way, it's less taxing on the brain. The mind does not get so tired from all that splitting. Like, yes, we can split like driving a car. Okay, right now I'm paying attention to the accelerator, the brake, the clutch, the shifter, right? You're thinking about that, and you have to think hard about it. The more you do it, the less attention you have to give to each one of them. You're still going to have to give attention to those things, but not like 3 seconds worth of attention. It's like a split second. Oh, have I hit the brake? Have I hit the brake? Right? It just shortened that attention that you have to split.
Wow. Yeah, we definitely like we are AI, literally. I mean, this is a weird kind of thought. And it's just interesting. So it's like the brain can't multitask, but it can multi-thread, right? So like up here is kind of its own little VM, and changing context is very expensive in terms of cycles required. But changing threads is rather trivial as long as we're using
Right.
the same context, the same pool of info. Um,
Yeah.
this is very, very, this is like revolutionary for me. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, good stuff, man. I've been putting a lot of thought into these things because it allows us to live better, right? If we understand how we work better and we can be more deliberate at the things that we do, then yeah, it all pays off. It's a great investment. It's not expensive to spend time self-reflecting, right? If we don't have time to self-reflect, how are we doing? Are we, working towards our purpose and values? If we are not, just stop. Why are you doing that? It's like you're driving on a road and you took the wrong exit and you just keep going. Whoa, I'm doing 200 miles an hour. This is amazing. Like, no, stop. You're going really fast. That's great, but you're going in the wrong direction. Well, same thing with life. I'm doing a lot of work. I'm so busy. Are you working on the stuff that matters? Well, I don't know. Like, yeah, you should.
Wow. Okay. Well, that is a great place to go ahead and end this. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Any projects you're working on you'd like to get like to get out there, or where can people reach you? Any websites, blogs you'd like to plug? This is your
Sure.
time.
Yeah. Folks can always just find me on Lassala, LASSA.net. That's my blog. That's where I keep everything. Like, all of my professional work, the software development thing that I do, and like agile related things that I do, and also my music stuff. I tend to drop notes in there, as well as my motorcycle riding. I'm a big fan of motorcycle riding at racetracks and stuff like that. So I put those all in there, and then there I may link people out to like my YouTube channel for this thing, my YouTube channel for this other thing. It's all there. Those are the main
Okay.
things.
So lassala.net, LASSALA.net.
That's correct.
All right. Sweet. Well, Claudia, thank you so much, and I can't wait to have you back on. All
You're
right. Hope
very
you have a
welcome.
phenomenal rest of your day. Okay.
Absolutely. You too, man. All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye.